Welcome. In this episode I'm going to continue on where I left off looking at character classes, and I'm going to look specifically at tagging, using those character classes to match and substitute. So if you're following along in the book, this is starting out on page 89. So I already cleared my environment and you can see that I was working with this already, but I'm going to go ahead and start off with the text vector that has two character strings. This is the first example sentence, and this is a second example sentence. And I'll start out the same way that he does, showing what would happen if you use gsub with the word character class and saying one or more word characters together, and say we wanted to replace that with word. You can probably already see that it's going to actually replace the word and not tag in such a way that we can still see the word. But let's look at it do that. And we can see that. So it replaced them. So if we want to tag it and still keep all the words there, then our alternative is to still use gsub, but we can search for the character, or we can search for the class of breaks. So that's the breaks that are between words and don't actually take up any space. So we look for those, replace those with the tags, and we'll end up with one at the beginning and one at the end. And then we'll take a look at it. Oops. Either run this one or this one. So we can see it tagged at the beginning and the end. One thing that you might want the option to be able to do is to put a different tag at the end of a word. So even though this isn't the complete way that we would need to do it because of the periods in some place, the spaces in the other, this would be one way to start that. So the way that I was playing with this earlier is like this, still using gsub, following up after having inserted the word tags. I could additionally search for everywhere there, I need to open and close parentheses since I want to be able to identify a unit, and say everywhere there is a word tag together with a white space, then I want to put a /w. I need my quotations. And then I'll put the space back in there, since in this particular one I know there's spaces. I'd have to work differently if it were a different text. And this time I'm working with text 2. And we'll see how text 2 changes. So I'll come up here, run this, and must not have run something right. Oh, I did. I'm not sure why it's showing this, but I can see my backslash. So it shows beginning and end of the word, beginning and end of the word, and the part that it doesn't account for is when it's at the end of the sentence. So moving on to, well, I could back up a bit and show how we could take an additional step and replace the space with any one of the punctuation, but I'm not going to take that extra step now. Instead, let's move on to the same thing that he does, which is tagging different classes within a text. And so it's not tagging the beginning and the end, it's just plain at the end of a match, putting a tag. So the first one that we would look for is a word, and this is a worthwhile mechanism in that we're still using gsub, but we're using again parentheses to say to look for a unit, and we're saying from the word character class one or more occurrence of them, and then here the two backslashes and the one back references, and it says every time you found that unit, follow it with this tag. So it's not replace it, it's follow it. So we still have text in its original form, curl and true, and I'll just follow it with text 2. I could put parentheses at the beginning and end so it would display immediately, but I like to do it this way. So what this has done, for some reason I wasn't expecting it at the end of the space. It's a little hard to see, but I actually think that's a capital there. Let me try that again. That is what did it. So it was finding everything that was not a character class and following that with a W. That's pretty interesting since I didn't do that before and I didn't mean to do that. I must have held down the shift too long. Okay, so then following that, if we want to mark the punctuation or tag the punctuation, we could put this into a new character string, gsub. We'll use parentheses to say where you're looking for a unit. And in this time, we're going to identify the character class of every punctuation that we want it to look for. So anything that needs to be accepted has the backslashes before it, so the period has other purposes, and then the same thing for the question mark. And then we want it to say back reference every time there's a combination of that. Follow it with the P tag, and we want to pull from the second text that we already changed. And let's take a look at it. So we have all our words followed with the W tag and all our punctuation followed with the P tag. So let's stop with that one for today.